We,
Sohnia,
and Jaanuni, are a couple of pals studying science in undergrad. We are not professionals.
though every episode is meticulously researched, mistakes do happen.
If you notice that anything,
And we mean anything.
we state is inaccurate, please let us know.
Your comments, suggestions, and queries are important in furthering our personal and audience's understanding of science.
Thanks for being a part of this discussion.
We appreciate you.
We really do.
Bop bop, beep bop bop.
Jaanuni, how you doing?
I'm great, Sohnia. How are you?
I'm not too bad. It's warm outside, or maybe just in my room because the light's kind of shining on my face.
It is warm outside.
Yeah, I haven't been outside today.
Okay, that's.
Yeah, I need to go on my walk though. I'll do that after a call.
We love that. I love that. Anyways,
that's my day.
my day was great. Thanks for asking.
I was getting into it. I'm glad you're doing well. How the doggos?
The doggos are great. How's the meow?
The meow. I'm not gonna lift him up. He's been sleeping. He's been so cuddly.
Oh.
He's sleepy. Okay, we'll put him down. I'm sorry, buddy.
That is the other guest. That's Speaker Bros guest star today. Thank you guys. Anyways, guys, welcome back to another episode of Beaker Bros. Where we drink out of beakers.
Because we're bros.
Dink. Can I also show you? I need to show you this.
Trying to find if I have a cup. No, I don't.
For my birthday, my friends got me a beaker mug.
Oh, that's fun. Is that from the campus store?
This one, I think Amazon ? They said, but yeah. Right. Anyways, on this week's episode, it is time. It is summertime. People are traveling. Yes, people are going vacations and all that fun stuff. But there's also a part of people. What am I trying to say? There's also a group of people that are going to volunteer in other countries, also known as volunteer tourism or voluntourism.
Yeah.
And that's what our episode is about.
Absolutely. I think that was a great little introduction there, Jaanuni. There's been a lot of misconceptions surrounding voluntourism the past couple decades, and we wanted to shed some light on some of the research surrounding what it is and its effects on different communities internationally.
I love that. Maybe before we get into the impacts of volunteerism, Sohnia, what is volunteerism?
Great question, Jaanuni. So there's a lot of definitions for what volunteerism is. One word we have here, we just grabbed from the Merriam-Webster dictionary, but we'll elaborate on it a little bit. So voluntourism or volunteer tourism is the act or practice of doing volunteer work as needed in the community, where it could be either where someone may typically, vacation, or it may be in some sort of remote community. And that's the definition that they have over here. And typically these volunteer tourism or voluntourism is run by different organizations. They can often be quite expensive depending on the organization that you go with or for how long you go for.
Yes.
And that's voluntourism.
I remember back when I was 16 or 15 and looking into volunteerism and stuff because I thought it was really cool. I didn't realize that you had to pay, and I was like, "Oh, wait, I'm volunteering. Where do I have to pay?" And I was like, it made sense because you are volunteering your time and your money also. But you're kind of right. It is expensive at times.
Yeah, and for a lot of the organizations that currently exist that run these voluntourism trips, they are for-profit organizations. So, not to nitpick whatever, but certain ones, I think majority of the funding goes back to the organization, and obviously there is some fees that go toward paying for local hostels and local tour guides and folks, and contributes to whatever community project that's going on. But for the most part, a lot of them are run by for-profit organizations, which is why it's so expensive. And oftentimes the money that you're contributing, whether it be $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, whatever it is, it's not as effectively being used as it could be if you were making a direct contribution to whatever community project.
I guess that can start off as being literally one of the negative impacts of volunteerism, right? Yes, there's that whole aspect of the money that you're putting into it doesn't directly go into those host communities versus and making that impact versus it goes back to the organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sorry, were you gonna say something?
Oh, I was gonna ask. I have a couple of articles pulled up here that sort of talk that are either like scoping reviews or just qualitative researchers that comment on people's experiences of volunteerism. But I was wondering before maybe I get into those if you had any research that you pulled up of some of the negative aspects.
Yeah, so like one of those two, like how you were talking about how the money goes for the organizations, not towards the host communities. There's also an aspect where there's a neglect on locals' desires. So the whole aspect of like volunteers going there and not like, yes, you have that volunteers doing all what they want to do. And it was really cool because I was reading this one article and I was talking about how like volunteers are not longer doing it for altruism, but more for like self-gratification. And I was like, really, like there's, I mean, this can be a whole different podcast topic, but there's no such thing as altruism. Like when you really look at it, it's always something that's going to benefit back to that person. So I mean, that's a whole
there was a book, I don't know if it was you that was talking about it. It was about like the idea of altruism. I don't, maybe it wasn't you.
I think it was me.
Okay, but anyway, sorry, continue.
Yeah, but I was like, it was just one of those aspects where like people, like volunteers are going there and doing that. And just like, there's a whole part of like, is that what the locals wanted? Right. Like, yeah, there is an aspect where what the volunteers are doing can be beneficial for them, but there's a whole aspect of like, first, the volunteers, like to volunteer, there's no qualification or like skill requirements you need to do, like building houses and the stuff like that. Like you really don't need any skills. So when that comes, like sometimes the work is just not that good. Like realistically, like they don't have the qualifications, the work that they're doing is not great. And also like because they don't have that skill set, it can like hinder the work progress, right? Like it maybe can be faster if someone else was doing with actual skill sets, but if when it's not, it just hinders it and or like it's just not good enough. And there's that whole other aspect of like, yes, we have volunteers going to do it, but it can also impact the local economy, not like national economy, like the local economy, where why couldn't they allow like local members of that community to do that instead of having volunteers come for that? So it's kind of putting people out of jobs within the local community of like they could be the labor, doing the labor and all that stuff. So there's also that impact of like we really have to think about the host communities and like take it away from like volunteering. Because like, okay, when I first looked up impacts of volunteerism, they immediately talked about it makes you less stressed, great feeling about sense. And like it literally focused all of that like positive impacts on the volunteers. Not once, like in my research where I was trying to come across like a quick Google search, did it really talk about the impact they might have on host communities and all that stuff. Like I really had to dig for this information to like, what is that impact on like host communities? So I think that's also like a really big thing where like volunteerism is like really kind of, what's that word, garnered towards the volunteers rather than the host communities in some cases.
I can't think of the word of what you're trying to say, but I think I get the idea of where you're going from. And I think sorry, were you done with your comment? I don't want to cut your flow off, but I think like all the comments that you said, I think it also ties into some of the stuff that I found about the fact that volunteerism can be unsustainable because going back to the idea that we were talking about before we started recording this podcast, oftentimes like volunteerism organizations, they more so are geared towards giving handouts rather than giving like uplifting the community that they're working in. And these handouts, yeah, they can like because of that sort of action, it's not sustainable, right? Like if one organization is solely responsible for like funding community projects, if that organization dips, like what are you going to do? Like that's not sustainable. And then the other thing that you were saying, it also ties into the idea of like but of like a savior complex. And if you look into the research surrounding like a lot of the people that go on these volunteerism trips, it's more often Caucasian individuals that come from upper middle class or upper class. Like they come from a higher socioeconomic bracket.
Okay. Yeah.
And yeah, and again, like not to judge the people necessarily that are going, but if obviously if it's like one group of people that are constantly like feeding into this sort of industry, it limits the diversity of perspectives and the good that can be done. If it's just like one group of people doing, like it's not taking into account the local desires, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, yeah, kind of ties back to the whole like local desires and stuff too. Because I think I was reading on like one thing too, like how you say like did you say upper class?
Yeah, like, yeah, people
Um,
from wealthier families. Yeah.
yeah. So there's the whole aspect where like most of the time, not most of the time, majority of the time, really, like the volunteers that are going there to volunteer their time are from developed countries going to developing countries. So there's this whole like conceptualization of like poverty and like how they view it and like being, I guess like when they do it, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm doing it adds the whole like savior complex where it's like, oh, I'm doing so much like good for the world. And like, yes, that is amazing. Yeah, you can be helping all that stuff. And um initially like there was good intent with that. There's no like or argument with that, but you also have to look at the actual like I think there's like ignorance to it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what it is, where it's like, yes, it's amazing what you're doing. And like, again, you can have great intentions, and that's what it is. But you have to look at like how it is impacting the community itself. There's this whole aspect too, where it's like when you go to host communities and stuff, like local resources are drained in the sense where host communities are essentially like they want to be great hosts, right? Like the families and stuff. Because sometimes, like when you go, like as a volunteer, you would go and like live with the family. So those families, those host families might be like making sure like you're able to experience everything in their country or in their like local community, giving all their like they want to make the best dishes for you and all that stuff too, right? Like there's that aspect where like instead of investing that to themselves, they're like putting it all on the volunteers because they want to like be great hosts and stuff too. So you kind of also have to look at that like aspect too. Yeah, I think that just like there is a underlying ignorance to some of this. And I mean, for me too, like at one point, like I really wanted to do volunteerism and stuff. And I remember just reading something and someone's like, I think it was like a post of like, if you something like, oh, like apply to be this and like your little short sample of something is why is volunteerism bad? And I literally in my head, I went, wait, volunteerism is bad? And I had to like pause myself and I was like, what? I think they like misspoke or like miswrote something. But I literally had to like search this up and do it myself. And I was like, oh, volunteerism is like, it's not that great as much as like the media and world perceives, right? There's even like one point where so there's this whole thing where so there's this article from the Huffington Post that basically talked about how Haitian, is that how you say it?
Haitian, yeah.
Haitian
Like
parents.
Haiti.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Haitian parents were basically told, and some even like paid to send their children to live in like orphanages where they would receive healthcare and education and like basically told like they would have better opportunities at this orphanage. But then the orphanage posted images of the children online to like solicit support and funds from like around the world. And after like being rescued, basically the children were told that they were left hungry, they were beaten, some were forced to do heavy labor instead of actually going to school. And like, I mean, I guess you're all wondering like, what does this have to do with volunteerism? Basically all of this basically has where like volunteerism, especially at places such as orphanage, is basic, it encourages like the children to be there and it encourages that, sorry, there is a fly. It basically encourages how it kind of shows how adult in positions of like authority and power can take advantage of children for the benefit of volunteerism, because it's like the whole like it's for profit organizations, like a big like there's a big circle cycle of like, okay, yes, they have children here, and then because of that people like, oh, they want to make a difference, so then organizations have post these pictures and they gain volunteers, and it's just like a never ending cycle where like it's benefiting the wrong people and hurting the people that need to be hurting even less, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess oh, I had a comment. Oh, I remember what I was gonna sorry, but I actually don't remember what I was gonna say.
Okay, basically I guess like really sum up my point was that how there is like we don't recognize that aspect of volunteerism. Like yes, volunteers are not doing anything from that, but there is that like that hidden truth of volunteerism, like what really goes behind the scenes for to attract volunteers to come all the way to do all that stuff. But yeah, I don't know, it is very sad. And I like after reading that I was like, wow, like that happened, I didn't even know that was a thing, and I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah, like for some people at least, it's really unfortunate that like it stems from a desire to want to do good, but it what am I trying to say here? Like, but the fact that some people are like, a lot of issues that these organizations claim to try to address and fix, like there's systemic issues. So like it's not even the fact that like, oh, donating like X amount of dollars could cure whatever thing or solve whatever issue. It stems from like war. It stems from like internal turmoil. And I guess like organizations, when they're trying to profit off of those ideas and say we can cure or fix whatever problem that's going on if you just, you know, pay $4,000 to come on this trip, I think that's like immoral. I can't think of like any other word to describe it.
No, you're right.
But on the flip side of the coin, I think we did talk a lot about good thing you muted. That would have been a loud sneeze. But we did talk a lot about like sort of the negative consequences, but what about maybe some of the, I don't know, the flip side of the coin? Where are there any benefits to volunteerism?
It's the whole thing of like, if volunteerism was well thought out and sustainable, then a volunteer's action, like long term, can have an impact, right? So there's this whole instance where, so one example was, instead of going abroad to teach English to students, why don't you use your resources and teach local teachers already living in that community to improve their English and their teaching methods instead? So there are benefits of volunteerism, I think, for sure, but it's all about like how to alter their methods to benefiting the local, like truly benefiting the local community, is what I think. And also maybe even just actually learning about the new culture anywhere you go, right? Like respecting the culture. I think volunteerism does give you the opportunity to immerse yourself in the community and like surround yourself with like these people and doing activities. And it might even help you give you like a really good perspective on different global health issues, right? And like seeing the global inequity there is too.
Yeah, I think one thing with like the interesting thing about global health, Jaanuni, I know obviously that's like the master's program that you're planning on starting up soon.
Yes.
Have you ever taken any, like, other than like in the global health courses that you have taken, have you, what am I trying to say? Like, have any of your courses touched upon like voluntourism or stuff like that?
I don't think so, actually.
Okay, cool. The reason why I ask is just because like whether you're talking about like voluntourism or a lot of different things within like the humanitarian space, it can get like pretty demoralizing when you realize like a lot of the biggest issues in the world can't be solved by like throwing money at it. And I think voluntourism is one of those things that really highlights that. But sorry, that was a little bit off topic, but yeah, but going back to what you're saying about like some of the benefits, it is important to recognize like some of those aspects, though they may be like super minuscule in comparison to like the monstrosity of disadvantages that come from it. But I guess from like, sorry, I'm trying to gather my thoughts, but I keep apologizing. I need to stop doing that. But maybe again, not from like bettering the community, but from like a personal perspective, I guess for some folks it does open them up to some of the issues that are going on in the world. Like, again, if you come from a high income community, you probably haven't seen poverty or learned about it. Or maybe you have learned about it, but like seeing and experiencing is a different experience, I guess, than
especially also like coming from like a sheltered like lifestyle and being able to immerse yourself in that, like it does give you a different perspective, I would say. Like if you go in with an open mind and are able to immerse yourself in the community and really learn about all like the inequity and like the culture too, it will allow you to like really, I guess, gain perspective is the best way to say it. Yeah. Anything else you want to add about like advantages of volunteerism?
That's like, I really like, even from the research that I've done, I can't see like there's more cons than there are pros.
Yeah. there was a time in the media where volunteerism was praised and like it's so great and amazing, right? But then you hear all these horror stories of like children and all that stuff where like really shines light on, I guess, the reality of volunteerism, right?
Yeah.
And
Like it's disgusting. Like you're like just from the Guardian article that you're saying, like that's like why are you doing that to kids? Like
literally, it's sad. And I wouldn't put blame on the volunteers or anything, but like the organizations that really do all of this, right? That do it for profit instead of like actually wanting to make a difference, and like instead of like helping the actual like host community, trying to bring people and be like, here, like you make the difference, you do something, right? Just like that money could be spent in just in a better way, I think is the best way I can say it.
mhm. And that begs the question, what is the better way?
I mean, that whole example I gave you, right? Like instead of getting people, instead of volunteering, like us as English speakers to go and like teach English,
Right. Mhm.
right? Use our skills and we can teach the teachers there in the local community how to improve their English skills and teaching methods. Like there's ways that we can do that, right? Or like instead of like having volunteers go there with actual skills, building houses, maybe teach the local community there how to like build houses and how to use the resources like responsibly and stuff like that too. There is
Yeah.
methods of like, I think it's primarily on educating the local community better of how to use their resources and even educating them on different skill sets that they might not have the opportunity to have.
Mhm. But in saying that, it's not in a matter of like finger pointing, like
Yeah,
you're
no,
doing this wrong.
no,
It's
no.
also obviously that's like what
It
you're
comes from a
saying,
sense
but
of
like
privilege, right? Like we're
yeah,
privileged enough to receive this education, and um, assuming that like in developing countries and local communities, they might not have that privilege, right? And I definitely think we come from a privileged background of receiving. I mean, we're in higher education, right? As women in STEM too, right? Like we're like actually very privileged to even get to this point, right? And we're able to learn even like the basics of stuff. Like let's talk about how accessible it is to Google how to change a tire on our phones, right? And stuff
have you
like
need to do that? That's a very specific example.
no, I have CAA, okay? So that's my bestie. But in the case of like I need to, like I can Google it or something like that, right? Like we have, again, we come from a privileged background where we're able to do that, you know?
Yeah, and I think it's also important to approach like humanitarian aid in general with
Mhm.
cultural perspective. Because I don't remember if when you took, did you take the 3Q03, the global health course at the same time?
As
Do you
you,
remember?
not the same as you.
Okay, then there was one article I remember reading. It was basically talking about how, God, was it the polio vaccine? I don't know, but in like certain communities in, I forget what African nation it was, but there was like a lot of vaccine hesitancy because of like religious reasons, like spiritual reasons, whatever. So what a lot of organizations, or not a lot, but what some of organizations tried doing is like connecting with community members and people of authority and respect. So in one of the communities that the article references, they worked with, I think it was a shaman. I don't remember the correct term for it, and like he was able to reach out to the community saying like, hey, this is what is really going on with this vaccine. It's not trying to like put a chip in you, because also with during the time, I can't remember the country, but there was a lot of mistrust in the government because there was like a lot of conspiracy theories and fraud and like issues going on. So rather than like coming in as like a Western organization saying you need to take this to end polio, they connected with the community members, and that ended up being more effective.
Yeah. So I think I remember this, where they were building trust with the community leaders itself, instead of trying to be like going straight to the community, like build a relationship with the community leaders and let them advocate for that.
Yeah, the term is definitely not shaman. I can't remember what it is, but it was someone of like spiritual authority that the community.
I feel like the word is in my head, but I can't think of it.
Do you know which article I'm talking about, by the way?
Yes, I remember. I can't.
Yeah, I think it might have been in Zimbabwe, but I can't remember specifically.
I cannot remember.
That's okay.
It's not
If
coming
I find it, I'll throw it in the comments or the whatever reference doc.
But yeah, I think that is important. I think we should really focus on like education, and I think building trust also with the community too. I think that is a better method of making a difference in these.
Yeah, obviously it's easier said than done. Like,
Yeah,
we're just two
literally,
people
though.
like wiggling our finger
Yeah.
and pointing our fingers at people. Like, we should change the system and do it this way, but
No,
it's definitely easier said than done. But it's important to have these conversations.
exactly.
Change the status quo.
Well, anyways, I think that is a great way to end this episode.
I
Any
agree.
additional comments, Sonia?
Drink water. Hydrate. That's not about the podcast. Like, that's the last comments I had. Just drink water. It's important to stay hydrated.
Okay, well, you heard Sonia.
That was all that came to mind because I need to drink water. Like, this was a comment for me. I need to go drink water, but
Sonia,
that's it.
Water. Okay. Bye.
Bye.